Hello, everyone. I want to officially welcome you to our first episode of the Veritas Project. My name is Cody McCollum. Just to explain a little bit about it, this is something I've been working on for quite some time. Something I am incredibly fascinated with is the purpose of our existence. As mere spots in an infinite galaxy, why are we here? Is there even a reason? Are we accidents? Or is there a bigger purpose? I'm sure it's something that most everyone listening has pondered at some point. I want to find the truth to our existence, our reality, and our perception of our reality, and how that correlates with everyone else's existence and perception. I personally was raised as a non-denominational Christian and served in the church for over 10 years of my life in many different areas. However, in my early to mid-20s, I started questioning many things about the church and my belief, and have since left, and as of now, I no longer consider myself a Christian. However, that is not to say I don't believe in God's existence. I consider myself an open-minded skeptic, and want to get to the bottom of it. Why do people believe what they do? Are there any common denominators between these different beliefs and cultures? And I don't want to simply focus on religion and spirituality. As the show goes on, I want to delve into many other topics, ranging from psychology, politics, equal rights, philosophy, and just human nature in general. Nothing's off the table. To kick off our first episode, I will be talking to an old acquaintance of mine. His name is Albert, and I've known him since I was a teenager, and he was the pastor of the children's ministry at the same church that I served in. I've since reconnected with him recently and told him about this project. As it turns out, he has since converted from being a passionate, non-denominational Christian children's pastor and now identifies himself as an atheist. I found this incredibly fascinating and wanted to give him an interview to let him explain how he made that transformation in his life. For all beliefs, whether Christian, atheist, agnostic, Muslim, Buddhist, Catholic, Wiccan, there seems to be a lot of misconceptions and assumptions for people that are outside of those beliefs. So this is my angle for the first chapter of the Veritas Project, for people to come on here and feel free to share their thoughts, beliefs, and reasoning behind it in a non-hostile environment, and for listeners to be able to listen and gain insight and maybe become a little bit more educated about these certain beliefs and cultures or what have you that you may not understand or be familiar with or educated in. So with that, I want to go ahead and welcome you, Albert. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on here and do this. I know you have a lot that you want to share, so I will go ahead and shut up and give you the floor.
Okay, so starting off with my story, right? Which is great because we go back a few years with my story. I mean, we used to work with Children's Church together.
Yeah, you were the children's pastor for quite a while, and you were the one that recruited me into it. But you also left the church long before I did.
Yeah, we did, and that was the second church I did that for. I had a church previous to that had 300 kids. It was huge. So when I went to the church we were together at, I said, hey, I ran a really big children's church ministry. Can we do it here? You know, I can do the same thing here. And that's when you and I got involved in it. But so let me see. I got saved at 14. I'm 46 today. I got saved at 14. And I didn't really, it was like a supernatural, amazing experience. I was like, I can't believe that these supernatural things are real. It's just incredible. And I really didn't backslide, but I wasn't the best Christian until I was about 18 is when I got heavily involved in church. I got involved in music ministry. I can tell you so many miraculous stories. Like one of them was I'd never played an instrument in my life, and when I was walking out of church one day, our conga player wasn't there, and this is back in Florida when I was about 18. And I just got on the conga drums and started playing them. I suddenly knew how to play the conga drums. It was an amazing miracle, right? Doesn't that sound like an incredible miracle?
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like
Holy
amazing.
Spirit was flowing?
Yeah, it was flowing. It was unbelievable, right? And it's one of many miracles. I heard God's voice tell me about a person who was in the church who I'd never met before. And I said to her, God says he knows that you're having problems with your parents. It was a girl who was in her teens. He knows you're having problems. He's there for you. Don't leave his side. And she just broke down and fell down and started crying. Incredible miracle, isn't it?
Oh, of course.
Of course, right? So every single miracle that I ever experienced, solidified my faith in God and walk with Him, right? So, needless to say, from 18 up, I was a hardcore Christian fundamentalist. The world is only 6,000 years old. Tongues is a real language. Miracles happen. I'm super lucky that I'm actually in the right religion. Everybody else is in the wrong religion.
Right.
Right. Yeah, hardcore Christian until I was about, let me see, ministries that I did. I was in music ministry. I played bass. I played drums. I played keys. I was in a band that toured around the country, and we performed, a Christian band that performed in big churches. Our first show in the East Coast had 2,500 people, man. It was awesome. And we preached the gospel. A lot of people, teens got saved. I was also involved in drama, music. I ran the drama department for a church for a while, and children's church, of course, where Cody and I worked together. So tons of, I would speak at teen gatherings, and so a lot of hardcore Christian stuff. So when I get into something, I get hardcore into it. And just to define my version of Christianity, because there are many, many versions of Christianity. Mine was the fundamentalist one, that gay rights, gays was a choice and they were wrong, they're going to hell. I was telling my children, if you meet somebody who's gay, stay away from them. They have demons on them, attach themselves to you. It sounds freaking funny, but it's amazing how many people believe that, right? And if any Christians are listening to this and you're Catholic or you're a different form of Christianity that doesn't believe in that, I wasn't a crazy person. There's a reason why people will listen to these things and believe them. And in the past 2 years, I actually figured out why. It's not anything completely new, but I figured out why. So, Cody, you wanted me to talk about my deconversion too, right?
Yeah, because for me it was a gradual process. I was questioning things maybe a couple years before I even left the church, because I was still bound to it, thinking, well, maybe it's just a phase, or maybe it's an attack of the enemy, or something. And even after I left, I had a very difficult time dealing with it. I spent a long time afterwards trying to find God. I wasn't trying to disprove God, I was trying to find Him so He was finally real to me. I didn't want to come to the conclusion that 10 years of my life was just a waste of time. So for me, it was a gradual process, and I was interested in hearing about how it was for you.
Yeah. I think for most people, it's a gradual process. And there's this misconception that when you stop your belief in God, that it's almost like when you started your belief in God, boom, overnight, right? So people will ask me, you're an atheist? You used to be a Christian? What happened? Like, does something have to happen for me to stop believing? No, but something has to happen for you to start believing. That's for sure, right? So when you become a Christian, it's some emotional thing. Your parents died, you lost a daughter or a son, or you got cancer. Incredibly, people who become Christians have those traumatic things happen to them. I wonder why.
Or you were raised in it.
Or you were raised in it, right? The ones that get really hardcore had some kind of experience like that. Or if you're raised in it, you believe it all your life, but you're not really involved. It's kind of a side thing, like Catholicism. Most Catholics will just, are really loose Christians, which I love. Catholics are my favorite Christians. So my conversion, I've been asked that question so many times, and I just can't pinpoint a moment when it happened, because it happened over the span of about 5 years. Mm-hmm. And I think if I can attribute a reason for it, is because I love truth more than anything. And there came a point in my life where, even from the beginning, when I was 18 years old, remember that church I said I played conga drums at? Mm-hmm. When I left that, I felt God was leading me to another church, that I should have left that church. I felt like God was just calling me to another church. So when I went to the pastor and told him, I feel like God's calling me to another church, of course, I was now instrumental in the church, and I was important because I was doing a lot of work. And his response to me was, if you leave this church where God wants you, you're going to lose your son, you're going to lose your house, and you're going to lose your car. The moment you walk, this is a true story. The moment you walk out the door, the devil's waiting for you right outside of the door. Right? So many people will say, you know what? I feel the presence of God, and what he's saying is true. Other people might get angry. And what I did was I said, wait a minute, the God that I know wouldn't do that to me. Why is this man saying that? Mm-hmm. That was my very first, and none of that led me to atheism, but that was my very first experience I had with the deception of religion.
Yeah.
Right? So instead of believing a man, I just fell back on God and said, I don't think God's going to do that to me, and I left the church, right? So I discovered later, that pretty much nobody hears from God, and I'll explain why that happens, and not only why. I'll also present a lot of evidence. That's why when we're talking about doing a half an hour or an hour, it's just not going to be enough, right? So later on, because I love truth more than anything else, around 33, incredibly, the age of Jesus, I began to question some things. And one of our mutual friends, Ryan, last name starts with B. I don't want to use any last names. I don't know.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. He said to me one day, he goes, "Why do we remove our hats when we pray? That's not in the Bible." And that made me go, "Beep, that's not in the Bible. Why do we do that?" So when the questioning begins is when all of this begins to unravel, right? So very, very slowly over many, many, many years, I just saw so much terrible behavior in the church, and I was like, this is crazy. How can all these powerful men of God behave like this? Our pastor, Cody, you and I went to him one day because he literally blatantly lied at the pulpit. And
no, not him.
No, a pastor, but he's a pastor. People say that. It's like pastors are different from other people. They're actually not. They're actually quite worse than other people. So he blatantly lied. And at the time I was married, and I went with my wife, who and I sat with him and I said, "Hey, you need to come to the church and say you lied, because I know what you're saying wasn't true." Because I was involved in the inner circle of the church, right? And I even told him I'll stand up there with him, right? And he talked himself out of guilt. He talked himself out of guilt in that lunch. It was like a 3-hour lunch. By the time we were done, he had convinced himself that he did nothing wrong. There's also an explanation for that, which we will cover. So I saw that, and I said, these men who behave like this, I'm just going to fall back on God, and I'm going to leave church. So I started doing home churches, right? Now, a bunch of Christians are hearing this now and going, "Oh, that's why I became an atheist. He went to a home church. That's not the way God works," and blah, 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 blah. And everybody has their own explanation as to how God works, incredibly. So little by little, as I detached from church, and I stopped all that false information. When I say false information, please, Christians who are hearing this, I'm not saying your Bible's false. Well, not yet. I'm not saying that. I'm saying false historical information, archaeological information, scientific information, all this information I was getting from the pulpit that I believed I no longer was being fed, right? And that's when I began to question these things. So what happened was I said, I don't want to defend God. God, you're real. I know you're real. I've experienced you in my life. I felt the presence of the Holy Spirit. You've spoken to me several times. I've seen miracle after miracle after miracle in my past, 15 years or so, or a decade or so of, 18 years of doing this. And I said, I know you're real, so I'm not going to defend you. I want you to defend yourself. And when I did that, I heard nothing but crickets for a really long time. I was like, this is not right. So I'm waiting to hear from you, and you're not talking to me. You're not, and then I began to slowly look into why these things were happening, and I began to look at the Bible a different way, and I began to say, okay, God, this Bible is your word. This Bible is perfection. There's nothing more perfect than this Bible. Let me look at it with an open mind and see what I find. And boom, contradiction, boom, contradiction, boom, contradiction, boom, contradiction. Okay, God, your word has this direct contradiction that cannot be explained. Explain it to me. Cue the cricket sound. And then I began to do even more research. And little by little, what I experienced was the only way I can describe it is just like in the movie The Matrix. Neo knew that he was in a real world. He knew that everything around him was real. He just had this little inkling that something was not right. Once you come out of the Matrix and you realize your body was in a pink egg full of goo and your mind was in a computer, why would you ever go back? Your eyes are now open and you're like, holy smokes, what the heck was I doing? I was so incredibly misinformed. But then even after that, I couldn't explain my experiences with God. I said, okay, the Bible is littered with problems, scientific problems, but problems about biology, problems about history, problems about geology, contradiction after contradiction after contradiction. And I said, okay, so I've now realized the Bible is full of crap. Okay, but I can't explain why I feel God's presence, why he speaks to me, why all these miracles happen. And then, boom, it happened. I found why that occurs. And that's when I became an atheist. Before I continue, any questions on that or anything else you wanted to talk about?
I think it's really interesting. It's very similar to what I went through.
Really?
Yeah, honestly, I read the Bible more after I left the church and deconverted than I did when I was a Christian.
Yes, me too. And so many Christians do that. They literally will read only what they teach on Sunday. They'll read it through the week, as well, but they don't know it like you and I know it. Like, here's an example. I say this to Christians all the time. I had an older lady knock on my door with a beautiful woman, and they both came to my door, and I said, we want to talk to you about Jesus. And I began to ask her questions. And she says, I studied the Bible for 30 years, and I have a degree in the Bible. And my question was simple. Do you know there are unicorns in the Bible? And she said, no, there's not. You've studied the Bible for 30 years. How do you know that unicorns don't appear? Unicorns appear in the Bible 8 times. How do you not know? Guess what? There's an explanation for why she doesn't know. And it's a psychological explanation. So I want to answer the questions, but I want to cover a few things that I discovered in my research the past 2 years in the psychology behind the religious mind.
Okay.
Yeah. First of all, it's already under study. It's called the religion natural phenomena, is what it's called. So scientists are attempting right now to understand why religious people behave the way they behave, why fundamentalists do the things like, when I say fundamentalists, I mean Christians and Islam, Muslims. I'm not saying just Christians alone. In this conversation, I'm going to speak mostly about Christians because that's what I know the most, right? But fundamentalists, so people blow up airplanes, run airplanes into buildings, blow themselves up. I mean, those are fundamentalists. But fundamentalists are also the Westboro Baptist Church that picket soldiers' funerals with God hates fags, even though the soldier's not gay. That is insane behavior. The KKK, Christians, they are Christians too. The KKK, what causes people to behave like that, right? Well, behind the religion natural phenomena, they're studying these things, right? And I've studied this as well, not only from information from them, but other psychologists that I found online that were fundamentalists and explain some of these aspects of these behaviors. And then I ended up coming up with a theory at the end that explains this even better. So in order to answer those questions, these topics have to be hit. So first thing I want to say is, Christians, whatever Christian is listening to this, you've been misinformed of what the word theory means. There's a colloquial theory and there's a scientific theory. So colloquial or slang theory is like, Cody, I know where you were today. I have a theory. I think that you were I have a guess. That's a slang way of saying the word theory. The scientific theory is this: fact plus fact equals theory. So the reason why it's called a theory is because it may not be completely explained or it cannot be completely tested, but all the evidence leads to it. For example, gravity is a theory. How do we know gravity is real? Because you pick something up and it falls. Not only can you test it, but it's also predictable, right? Why is it called a theory? Because scientists aren't exactly sure why dense matter causes other matter to be drawn to it. They're not exactly sure why. So it's called a theory, okay? The same thing with the theory of evolution. It is not a guess. It is a scientific fact. Mountains of evidence lead to the theory of evolution. And when you've been told at the pulpit that there's missing links, you are wrong. When you've been told at the pulpit that there are no transitional forms, you are wrong. There are many transitional forms. And in fact, we are all transitional forms. An easy transitional form to see is the whale. The whale has hip bones. Why does the whale have hip bones? It used to walk on land. Why does a manatee look like the way it looks? It's a transitional form. Transitional forms occur over millions of years. They don't occur overnight. You don't go from a cat to a dog. So when you Christians have been told that the theory, this is what I saw in church, the theory of evolution. You know what theory is? A guess. Wrong. A scientific theory is a fact. So the theory that I came up with at the end is a fact based on all this research. So starting at the beginning, have you heard of the concept of cognitive dissonance?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So for people who are listening and don't know what that is, cognitive dissonance is the uneasy feeling you get when you are presented with two opposing facts. Okay. So a great example of this is the Boston bombers. We had pictures of him with the backpack. We have the backpack, right? We have a video of them in a shootout with the police. It's a closed case. He admitted it. He admitted that he did it. It's a closed case. There's they have to go through the judicial process and do what they have to do, but there's no question about it, right? So his mother shows up, and CNN quoted her as saying to him, "Tell them that they set you up. Tell them you're innocent. Tell them the truth about how the FBI framed you." Why? Why does somebody look at mountains of evidence and then say something like that? This is due to cognitive dissonance. So this is the theory that I came up, cognitive dissonance, but the thought flow behind cognitive dissonance is the theory that I came up with. So it works like this. Once you experience cognitive dissonance, so her dissonance is this: her son is great. I mean, what mother doesn't love their child, right? Now she finds out her son's an asshole. Well, those are two opposing thoughts, right? So what occurs is the mind will take one of four routes. The first route will be denial of the evidence, which clearly is what this guy's mother did. The second route will be the justification of the evidence. In other words, well, he blew them up because they deserved it, right? Or the third route will be, the third of four, will be changing the evidence. Well, the picture, it's not really him. It doesn't look like him to me. Changing the evidence, right? And then the fourth one is key. The fourth one is proper evaluation of the evidence. Okay? So one of those four have to occur. Now, we're going to cover what religion does to those four options in a minute. But what I discovered also was that when you experience cognitive dissonance to opposing thoughts, and your brain just can't deal with two, only one can exist in your head, then if you are denied the four routes, then there's an explosion of emotion. When you can't take any of those four routes, there's an explosion of emotion, and the person will yell, will cuss, will scream, will storm off, or hit you, or blow something up, or act like a maniac, right? So what happens with religion is, not only religion, let me backtrack. If you're a hardcore Democrat and you don't believe anything, then, or if your son is the most wonderful thing in the world, then he's an asshole, right? Right? Or if you're in a religion, what occurs with those examples is that you are denied number four. You are unable to evaluate information properly. Because in order to evaluate information properly, you would have to admit that your thought process is wrong, if indeed it is wrong. Okay, so what happens with the religious person is, and here's a beautiful example. I was on Facebook talking to a Christian, and I said to him, I'm going to try not to cuss on this because if Christians are listening, I know that makes them uncomfortable, so I'll say F word, right? So I said to him, do you know there are unicorns in the Bible? And for the fundamentalists who are good at apologetics and they're good at discussing the Bible, I know why there are unicorns in the Bible. I understand the reasons why behind that. But that's another conversation. So I said to him, do you know there are unicorns in the Bible? And he said to me, show me the verse. I don't believe you, show me the verse. So cognitive dissonance. My Bible's perfect, but if his unicorns are in there, it can't be perfect. So now he's experiencing cognitive dissonance. So he started with denial. He didn't believe me, and he said, show me the verse. Okay, so now I pasted 8 verses. So now denial, he's denied denial. So remember, there's four ways the mind can go when it experiences cognitive dissonance. Denial, he can't deny it anymore, it's in front of his face. He can't justify it because it's right in front of his face. There's nothing he can say. He can't deny it, he can't change it. It's the Bible, it can't be changed. And he cannot evaluate it. So now all 4 are denied. He cannot, that cognitive dissonance cannot escape through any one of those routes. So he exploded with the F word. Well, F you guys, you're all effing this, and he disconnected from the conversation. Okay? Here's another example of cognitive dissonance thought flow. I presented the exact same argument to a woman, right? And she couldn't deny it because she's experiencing cognitive dissonance. She has 4 routes to go. She can't deny it because it's right in front of her. she can't change it because it's the word of God. You can't change that, right? So what she did, and she can't evaluate it because when you're in a religion, you're disabled and handicapped from evaluating information. So she ended up justifying it, and she said, maybe there were unicorns in Bible times. That was her answer to me. This is an intelligent person who said this to me. Another guy said to me, experiencing cognitive dissonance, another guy said to me, don't you love it how God uses imaginary animals to make a point? See? So here's what a critical thinker does. I'm not going to deny it. If I'm a Christian, I'm not going to deny it because I'm a critical thinker. I'm not going to justify it because I'm going to let God, and oh my gosh, I just made the connection. This is what I did when I deconverted. I'm not going to deny that there's a problem. I'm going to let God defend it. I'm not going to justify the problem. I'm going to let God defend it. I'm not going to change the problem. That's God's problem to change it. God, you need to, so I evaluated it instead because I was a critical thinker, and I went in to find out what was going on, and I discovered why there are unicorns in the Bible. And I said, oh, there's a problem here. You see, so a critical thinker is not denied that fourth route, but a religious person is. Okay, so having explained that, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so having explained that, we can go to a couple more things I want to cover, and one of them is the pattern that I see in behavior in fundamentalists. One of them is what I call a form of projection, right? So projection is when I'm a real big jerk, I'll say, that person's a jerk. I'll put my negative personality on that person. But there must be a psychological word or phrase for what I discovered, because I don't think I'm the first one to discover this. I call it just a form of projection where what's happening to them from their religion is projected out on other people. And you'll hear it like this. And you're going to hear this in the questions that I will that you are asking me. So you'll hear things like, oh, scientists are just guessing. Well, the entire Bible is based on guessing. It's based on guessing. Here's an example. The first king of Israel, Saul, before King David, in the Bible, he has 4 different ways that he died. His servant killed him, God killed him, he committed suicide, and then we killed him. 4 different ways the Bible chronicles his death. Which one is right? Well, a critical thinker will say, let me evaluate it, right? Well, I asked a friend of mine this question. I said, she's a fundamentalist. I asked her over Facebook, and her answers were like this. Well, most likely it's because blah, 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 blah. And probably because blah, 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 blah. And the third one, most likely, was just a lie. And then the fourth one was probably. So you notice it starts with most likely, probably, or I believe, right? Right. Why? Because their Bible does not coincide. The books don't coincide with each other. Some of it does, but the vast majority does not. Here's an example. My aunt posted a picture on Facebook. She says, be still, and something God goes, God will make your enemy your footstool. But yet Jesus says, love your enemy. There's a problem with this, right? So I don't like to use those because fundamentalists will talk away those explanations, but you can't explain why Saul died 4 different ways. You can't explain it, and contradictions like that exist over and over and over again. So Christians will say, oh, you're just guessing. You're just guessing. No, you're guessing. Christians will say, you're just trying to deceive me. The devil's just trying to deceive me. I'm sorry, your religion is deceiving you. You just can't see it because you're in the matrix. You know? So the other, so that's one thing that you'll see in the questions. The other one is filling in the blanks, which I just talked about. Well, most likely it's because it's most likely, or they'll say, here's another example. So the world was created 6,000 years ago. Yet we have trees that are 9,000 years old. How do you explain that? They fill in the blanks. Well, God made that tree old. I wish it was video so you could see me slap my forehead and my hair just flip around. Just come on, you're just filling in the blanks. You have no idea what you're talking about. You really don't know. It's a complete guess, right? Okay, so those were a couple concepts. So we can move on to the questions. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Which one do you want to ask?
Well, damn, you've covered quite a lot of them already. Well, for starters, you got into an argument with someone on my Facebook a while ago after he randomly started preaching to me on a comment that had nothing to do with religion whatsoever. Anyways, after you got involved, he started throwing air quote evidence at you, showing how events in the Bible were historically accurate. I believe he posted YouTube videos of decomposed chariots found at the bottom of the Red Sea and evidence of them finding Noah's Ark and whatnot. But, so what I want to know is how you respond to that. do you believe there is at least some truth historically from events in the Bible, or do you believe that it's all a lie?
Okay, great question. I love this question. So I have no problem with there being a God. I would love it if there's a God. I'd freaking love to live forever, right? But I do have a problem with the Bible saying that they have the right God and everybody else is wrong.
Right.
I do have a problem with that. So having said that, talking about historical accuracies of the Bible. So Christians, remember the cognitive dissonance explanation that I had. I'm going to give you information that's going to make you uncomfortable because it's going to go against what you have always known and have always believed, and you just know that it is true. So I'm going to give you information. So what route are you going to take? You're going to deny it, you're going to justify it, you're going to change it, or you're going to evaluate the information? Starts with this. There is no evidence of Moses. Not only is there no evidence of Moses, but there's overwhelming evidence, and archaeologists and historians have agreed that Egyptians did not use slaves to build pyramids. This is a false piece of history in the Bible. It is false. Now, you want to deny it? You want to justify it? You want to change it? Or do you want to evaluate it? Don't go to a Christian website to evaluate this information, because Christian websites are functioning under this cognitive dissonance with the inability to evaluate accurate information. You have to go to a neutral site that talks about archaeology, talks about Egypt, and let me break the news to you, fundamentalists. There's no conspiracy to hide evidence of God. I was told that. I preached that. There's no conspiracy at all. Nobody cares. They just want to find the truth.
So the devil didn't plant those dinosaur fossils to screw with us?
That's an example of the inability to evaluate information and changing the data to suit your needs. Yeah, the devil didn't plant fossils to fool us. It's absolute absurdities, right? So Bible historical accuracies. There's no evidence of David. There's no evidence of the temple that he built. There's no evidence of Abraham. There's no evidence of Jesus. There is none. You will find evidence of Abraham and David in Jewish websites. Absolutely, because they're religious and they cannot evaluate information. But you will find accurate information on archaeological sites. And hey, if I'm wrong, can you come give me information? I'm open for information. That's why I'm never uncomfortable with a question. I want information. So historical accuracies in the Bible, there are very few. And one of them is, let me give you another historical inaccuracy. There was no Nazareth at the time of Jesus. There was none. Why is there a Nazareth in the New Testament? Historians know. Go look it up. They already know why it's there. Okay? So the reason why I'm not telling you is I want you to go look it up. You probably won't, Christian, but you should. So yeah, there are some historical accuracies. Absolutely. There are some, and that's fantastic. But guess what? The Quran has that too. So do other ancient writings. So why is it that those ancient writings that are historically accurate are not from real gods, but your particular book is from a real God? Why? So I have no problem with the Bible having historical accuracies. Let me submit this to the Christians listening to this. Go to www.bibviz.com, which is short for Bible Visual, spelled B as in boy, I as in indigo, B as in boy, V as in Victor, I as in indigo, Z as in zebra.com. And look at the historical inaccuracies. The very top graph is my favorite. It shows the x-axis, the bottom blue lines show chapters of the Bible, and then there are red lines connecting the chapters that contradict each other. You can't even see through the red lines. You can't even see through the red lines, they're so thick. There are terrible historical inaccuracies in the Bible, but there are some accurate ones. So what does that prove? That's my answer to the question. What does that prove? There are many, many other books that have historical accuracies. Why is yours right and theirs wrong?
Why do you think some religions have remained over all these years? Some religions have fallen away, like Greek mythology. Why do you think Christianity still remains intact to this day?
And this is an answer that historians already know. There are a couple of reasons why Islam and Christianity are so prevalent. It's because they are threats. They're threats. Believe this or forever something will happen to you. But Zeus and Roman gods had no such threat. In fact, back in those days, many people believed in many different gods, and people would come up to each other, and this is just based on my historical research. They'd come up to each other and say, hey, what God do you believe in? Oh, I believe in so-and-so. Nice to meet you. But then Islam and Christianity came and said, what God do you believe in? Now I have to kill you. It's obscene. It's a terrible thing. So there are Christians fundamentalists, and the reason why I can almost read the mind of the fundamentalist is because I was one, right? The Christian fundamentalist is now thinking, no, that's because people have free will. They took the Bible the wrong way. Today we really know what the Bible's about. We really have a relationship with God. Back then they were wrong. Today we're right. So if you all follow one God, and this is the true word of God, why didn't God intervene and stop the multiple inquisitions and the millions of people that died? Why didn't he intervene in the Crusades and stop people from killing each other? And then Constantine came along and said Christianity, he either converted or he saw Christianity. Historians talk about both of them. He either converted to Christianity but saw it as a ability to control people, because it was a religion that was controlling people, control their minds. It perfectly uses this inability to evaluate information during cognitive dissonance. It perfectly uses it in order to control the mind. So he used it to control people, and it worked. And he created Roman Catholicism. And then there's a reward system. If you do what I say, you're going to live forever in pure happiness. All your children will be with you, and you're going to see angels, and the streets are made of chocolate, and you get $10,000 cash. So when you're given this incredible reward, and the opposite is this incredible hell, it's like putting a jet pack on your back. You're going to fly to that, of course.
One thing that gets me is that when you start talking about evidence and asking Christians, what about the people who never hear about Jesus?
Right.
And then they say evidence of Christ is just in nature itself. And the perfection of Earth, we have the perfect, gravitational constant. The atmosphere is made perfectly for us. We're perfectly the right distance away from the sun. How do you explain a perfect existence without intelligent design?
Well, first of all, this is something that happens a lot with Christians, right? And another aspect of Christian behavior, I was talking about filling in the blanks, projection and all that. Another aspect is working on the presuppositions. So they already assume that the reason why everything's perfect is because of their particular God, right? So scientists understand why this is like this. This is not a question, right? This is something that's known. The reason why we so perfectly fit this world and its atmosphere is because we evolved in this world and this atmosphere. So if anybody has seen the movie Avatar with the blue people and the flying dragons, right? Well, humans couldn't exist on that planet because those creatures evolved to live in that atmosphere. It's simple. Evolution clearly explains why that happens. Clearly. Bugs used to be humongous. A centipede was the size of an alligator. Why was it like that? Because oxygen was incredibly dense at that time. And insects don't breathe like we do. They take in oxygen through their outer shell. So they could become bigger because more oxygen was traveling through their shell and would reach their innards, and allow them to survive. But as oxygen got thicker over time, insects got smaller because the journey that the oxygen had to go through to make it to their system had to be shorter. So they got shorter and shorter and shorter. So animals adjust to atmospheric conditions. They adjust to how the earth rotates, how the earth is in existence. We are here because we evolved in this atmosphere. We don't know. There's going to be a time where human beings will visit other worlds. I mean, I hope that happens in the next million years. I don't know how long. But there'll be a time where we'll discover life on other planets, and that life is evolved for that atmosphere. It is a simple, simple explanation. So right now, fundamentalists are experiencing cognitive dissonance. I just made 100% sense. Don't break the channel to evaluate this when you experience this uneasy feeling. Don't change the information. Don't deny it. All right? Don't just evaluate it. Open the channel of evaluation, because your religion doesn't allow you to do that. And go do the research. Google it. It's simple. It's simple science. So the answer is not a God. The answer is because we evolved here, period.
Now, you kind of touched on this before, and I think I know the answer to it, at least for me, but I'd like to get more of your thoughts on it. back when we were in the same church, I was in the youth group, and you came as a guest speaker where you shared your testimony with us. But you also talked about your physical and spiritual encounters with God and how you would cast demons out and have divine interventions. Now, how do you explain all those experiences and encounters that you had away now that you don't believe in it?
That was such a great question. I love this question. If you go on YouTube and you look up the Atheist Experience, and you look up next to the Atheist Experience, put my name, Albert. I called in that show and I explained this one time, but I didn't explain it clearly. My phone was cutting out and cutting in, and so I want to explain how I want to explain that story in this recording because it'll be far clearer. So when I discovered during my transformation out of the Matrix, when I discovered how flawed the Bible was, not just kind of messed up, grossly flawed. It is grossly flawed. And the only way to justify the Bible is by guessing and filling in the blanks. It's the only way religion survives, right? When I discovered how flawed it was, then I said, you know what? I know God exists because of my personal experiences, my healings, and speaking to my mind, all these things, all these demon possession things that I saw, I know he exists. So I became agnostic, and I said, God, who are you? Explain to me who you are. I want to know. All right, so the question of these spiritual experiences came often, and I just couldn't figure it out. But here's the difference between me and you, fundamentalist. I don't want to make excuses for it. I want to evaluate it clearly and come to pure truth. So here's what happened. I have a friend who's a counselor, and one of the techniques she uses for counseling her clients is creating 3 personalities that are based off of things you've done in your life. So the 3 personalities are, and this is all imaginary. She's not saying, fundamentalists, don't run away, the devil wasn't talking to me. She's not saying these people exist. This is just a mental exercise. Okay? I wasn't hypnotized. I wasn't possessed. None of those things happened. I just sat there, and she says, okay, imagine a time where you were protective. And you're protective of your family and yourself and others around you. And I said, I remember this time I protected my brother who was going to get in a fight. I remember this time I protected my wife when somebody was aggressive towards her. I remember I'm very much a protector, I told her. And then she says, okay, well, what does that protector look like? Take all those experiences, roll them up. What does that protector look like? And I said, he looks like Leonidas from 300, but he's got my face, of course. And I've got his body, right? And I said, that's what it is. She goes, okay, we'll call him your protector resource, right? And then what about your spiritual resource? I remember his experiences of God and all these things that happen and blah, blah, blah. And I said, what does that look like? And I said, that person looks like just like this cloud, in the air, and it has like my personality in it. Okay, she goes, that's your spiritual resource. Then what's your, what was the last one? The last one was, I forget what it was, but this one looked like the Silver Surfer with my face on it. So she says, okay, so we established these 3 people. She says, whenever you're worried about something, you're nervous, or you have questions about something, just think about your resources and what they would say to you. Basically, what the exercise does is it gets all the good aspects of who you are, and it gets you to talk to yourself almost and say, what would I do, Albert? I don't know, Albert. Let me think about that for a minute. And you'll have a conversation with yourself. But because this is a positive person you're looking at that's imaginary, then it'll help you in your decision making. It just helps you coast along, right? So I said, that's a really good idea. Let me try that. So one day, I had to go to an interview, and I said, holy smokes, I'm a little nervous about this because this is not exactly what I do. It's a little different from what I do. I'm not sure if I should even interview for it. I'm not sure. And I said, let me call my resources to see what they'd say. And I was like, protector resource, I imagined Leonidas appear. Instantly, I felt the presence of the Holy Spirit. And I said, holy smokes, this stuff that I've been experiencing is coming from me. So then I said, I suspected it's coming from me. So I began to do the research, and lo and behold, Muslims have experiences with their God. Native Americans have experiences with their eagle spirits and their wolf spirits. Buddhists have experiences. Santeria has experiences. Satanists have experiences. This is something that is already known to come from your own psyche. And once I realized that, I said, holy crap. I laughed, and I was so embarrassed that I did that. I was so embarrassed. So now, fundamentalists are hearing this and they're saying, it's just a devil. It's a devil making you feel. There's always an excuse. Okay, if that's true, Get online, do the research, do it yourself. Don't believe me, do it yourself and find out how the human psyche works with these kind of spiritual experiences. There are names for them. What we experience in church where everybody's praying, and I just felt the presence of the Lord. Ooh, God, I felt the presence of God. That's called communal ecstasy. That happens in any group of people who get together and chant together. It happens to Buddhists. It happens to Africans when they're dancing around and doing their spiritual things. It happened to Native Americans dancing around the fire. It happens to every spiritual belief, and it is completely a human behavior.
I think it's interesting that even to this day I can speak in tongues the same way.
Yeah, me too. Oh my God, it's funny you say that. I was speaking in tongues the other day and I was laughing so hard because there are Christians that so I want to give the Christians listening to this another fact. Okay, get ready for cognitive dissonance. Children, turn off your speakers right now before you hear this. Hide this from your children. Hide it from them. So studies have found that there are between 33 and 45,000 versions of Christianity. Each version saying the other is wrong. Why? Why does that happen? Well, mine's right because I felt the presence of God. So they feel the presence of God too. They think tongues is a sin. They think tongues really just meant another language in the Bible. But you think tongues is real. Why? Because you feel it. Why is everybody in such disagreement? Drum roll, please. Because it's coming from you. And that explains why so many versions of Christianity are out there.
For the longest time I was trying to explain it to myself, thinking, well, what about that time I closed my eyes and felt the fire and saw the loving eyeball of God and he spoke to me clearly while the feeling washed over me. And when I reflect and look back, I realized that a lot of those experiences happened because I either was in a bad place and I needed to feel it, or I looked around and saw that everyone else was experiencing it, so I got upset or pissed off and forced myself to feel it. Or there were even times when it never happened to me, but was happening to others, so I just flat out lied and said it did, and then convinced myself that it actually happened.
Yes, and this is a phenomena that psychologists already understand. So, and this happens to everyone. When you become a critical thinker, it happens less because I catch myself now. But we are masters of self-deception. Masters. This is a normal human function. And human beings do this in order to relieve cognitive dissonance. So they'll say, I can't evaluate it, I can't deny it, so then I'll just pretend like it doesn't exist. And you'll see people doing this. There's a video where a video on YouTube, oh gosh, I knew I should have wrote this down, where Richard Dawkins goes to, I think it was a university, and there was a blonde woman that he's interviewing about the evidence for evolution. And if you get anybody who asks that they want to see this video, let me know and I'll find it for you. But what happens is this: you can see the self-deception on the screen. Once you understand it, she says to him, if evolution is true, why don't we have fossils all over the place? Why don't we have mountains of fossils? And Richard Dawkins, because he's an evolutionary biologist, he kind of, his brow goes, kind of furrows, and he says, what do you mean? There's mountains of evidence. Go to any museum and you'll see it. And you see her eyes suddenly glaze over. Okay? Psychologically speaking, it's called, there's a name for that. It's called sensory gating, right? So sensory gating is a natural human function that we have that will block out too much sensory input. And it's been found that autistic children don't have that block, so they're constantly receiving too much information. And it's the reason why they shake their heads and they hit their faces and stuff like that. There's too much information coming in at once, and they're unable to control it because they don't have the ability to sensory gate. They discovered this with an autistic girl who they discovered was able to type normal English, but she couldn't speak. And she typed all this explanation, this description, and that's how they discovered what it was. So sensory gating blocks out the air conditioner that I hear right now, my dog walking around, the next door neighbor slamming the door, a car honking its horn because I'm talking to you. And if I were to process every one of that little pieces of information, I would not be able to hold a conversation. So it's a natural function. However, religion exercises that function and forces you to use it when you're hearing something that you don't want to hear. So she sensory gates what he says. You literally see her eyes just glaze over for a minute and kind of look away and just kind of zone out. And then he's looking at her going, you can go to any museum. And then she repeats the same exact question again. If evolution is real, why aren't there mountains of room? You can see that she did not hear what he said because she blocked it. So some people call it denial, right? Sensory gating is the name for it. Then he says, but I just said, what do you mean? There's mountains of evidence. You can go to any evolutionary museum that has this kind of these kind of displays, and you can find it. And you see her eyes go off to the side, and she just blocks it. And then she comes back and changes the subject. Fascinating. Absolutely freaking fascinating, man. So this is the other aspect of religiosity, is exercising sensory gating in order to block out things that you don't want to hear. I find that fascinating.
So how do you live your life? What is your meaning to life if you feel that we're all just one big accident?
Right. Yeah, you see, so that starts out with the other typical problem with Christians is this presupposition. You start out with why don't we have a meaning for life? You must not have one since you don't have a God. That kind of thing. Listen, if you believe that there's some grand design and there's some meaning behind you living here, great. That's great. But the moment you try to force it on other people, then I have a problem with that. So the answer to the question is, first of all, I don't know if we were an accident. Scientists don't exactly know why we're here. There are some theories that talk about bacteria coming from another planet, from a projectile, an asteroid that comes in, and yes, bacteria can be frozen in there and then live again. That's possible. Some people, conspiracy theorists, say aliens brought us here. Some people say it's abiogenesis, the right chemicals came together and formed life. I don't really know. But you know what? I'm okay with saying I don't know, because I'd love to find out someday. Mm-hmm. So do we have a meaning to life? I don't know. I have my own meaning. I want to be the best person I could possibly be. Teach as many people as I possibly can to be critical thinkers. My meaning is my children grow up as critical thinkers. I've got lots of meaning. So why do these Christians assume with this question that I have no meaning, or that assume that we're an accident? I don't know. Maybe we're an accident. We don't really know. But the difference between science and religion is science makes no religious claims, but religion makes scientific claims. You know how the earth came to be. You know it was Adam and Eve and a talking snake. How do you know? You weren't there. And I've already demonstrated that the Bible is completely flawed. So what's my meaning? I've made my own meaning. Is there something wrong with that?
A big assumption people have of me now is that I'm an atheist and don't believe in God whatsoever, which isn't true at all. If you're going to label me anything, I guess it would be agnostic. God could be real. He could very well not be real. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that, and I don't claim to have an answer better than anyone else's answer. That's part of what this project is about. But if God were to reveal himself to me, I'd be like, great, yeah, God's real. You're real. Cool. But I don't know that I don't think God is who I've been taught he is, or who he claims to be. I'm not sure I would trust him. I'd be like, okay, let's have a conversation because I don't trust you. God is perfect because he says he is. As parents, you tell your kid that you know best and to listen to you, but as a parent, you sometimes make mistakes. Who's to say God doesn't make mistakes? Because he said so? Okay. Here's a problem I have that I can't wrap my head around. If we are supposed to shine the light of Christ and strive to show his love, first off, I'm not a parent, but I know parents and see how much they love their kids. But by God's standards, if he loves us as much as he claims to love us as his children, then as parents, we should watch our child, our toddler, crawl away from us towards an empty oven where they will burn. No, as a parent, you're going to scream. You're going to jump in front of your child. You're going to pick them up and pull them away. But if we live by God's example of love, we should just stand on the opposite side of the kitchen, whisper, "Don't do that. I love you," and warn them through symbols and vague mind games. And if your kid does crawl into the oven and burns to death, we say it was our child's decision. In my opinion, for someone omnipotent and all-loving, that isn't love at all.
No. it's like I've heard in the atheist experience, they say something like, what if, you own a bar and a guy comes in a suit and puts a shotgun to your head and says, I can protect you if you want, or I can shoot you. That's what God is, right? And then additionally, what's the reason why you punish your child? Well, for them to learn a lesson and correct their behavior, right? Well, hell's an eternal punishment. There's no lesson to be learned. Then it's not a punishment. It's just God torturing you because you don't bow to his will. A punishment is designed for you to learn your lesson and then straighten your ways out. If I were a God and I created a bunch of people, I'd be like, holy smokes, I want to take care of all these little people. Look how cute they are. I want to make sure they all survive. Let me show them who I am. Let me teach them who I am. Christians right now are going, ding, 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 ding. That's what he does with the Bible. I just demonstrated to you the Bible is grossly flawed. If you've not visited bibviz.com, then you need to. So God's not telling me with his Bible, because his Bible is wrong on astrology, it's wrong in cosmology, it's wrong in biology, it's wrong in history, it's wrong in archaeology, it's wrong in almost everything. It doesn't even agree with itself. So yeah. And I'm with you on that. You're like agnostic. There could be a God. You don't know if there is or if there isn't. But you know what? I don't know either. But none of the evidence points to it, so I call myself atheist until I see evidence. And one of your questions was, what do you do, if you have nothing to lose? One of the questions that you had posted was, it's called Pascal's wager. So I'd rather believe, because then I'll spare myself from hell, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But if I'm right, I spare myself from hell, right? And that's perfectly fine, unless your life is slavery to a church. Slavery to a God who gives you sexual desires, but then tells you you're not allowed to use them. It's absolutely asinine, right? So what's wrong with you believing that it destroys your life? And there's evidence that I just recently saw 2 weeks ago how religion causes severe damage to your psyche. And it slows down your social evolution or your social growth with other people. That happened to me. I had to learn how to be social. I had to learn how to say normal things in front of people because I was a weirdo. My son just called me yesterday from Texas. He's 24 and he's working at a very popular chain. And he said there's a born-again fundamentalist Christian who just started working with them who was homeschooled. And he says, everybody looks at him when he speaks and they say, what the heck is this guy talking about? He's not even talking about religion. He just makes assertion after assertion after assertion with no evidence, just assertion. People are like that because of so-and-so. The world is like this because of so-and-so. And I'm like, okay, well, porn is causing all these things to happen. We never heard of that before. Why do you make all these assertions? It's just the mind of the Christian becomes slightly crazy. The fundamentalist becomes a little crazy, and there's evidence about that all over YouTube. So yeah, what do I have to lose? Nothing, but you have a lot to lose, a lot, living in this nonsense of a God who's going to destroy you for not bowing to his will. It's just nonsense. It makes no sense.
One of the biggest myths of the Bible is that Jesus talks about hell more than any other subject in the Bible, which I don't think is true at all. I have not been able to find any basis behind that whatsoever. I think people just believe that to be true because they heard it was true from someone they respected, and the person that told them that heard it from someone that they respected and trusted, and so on and so forth, because I haven't been able to find him talking about hell more than any other subject in the Bible. He talks about the kingdom of heaven a whole lot more. You'd think that something so detrimental, he'd talk about heaven a lot more. I haven't found anything in the Bible that says if you don't ask Jesus into your heart to be your Lord and Savior, then you will burn in hell for all eternity and be tormented by demons and eaten alive by worms or what have you. One of my biggest red flags in the church initially was the things that were being taught as fact that didn't appear to be fact, at least in terms of based what you would find in the Bible. There was a theory or a theology that was taught repeatedly in the church about how the third of the angels that fell with Lucifer were the worshiping angels, and that we were created to replace them, to fill that void in heaven, because evidence was that our bodies were living instruments. We have windpipes in our throat, our hands are drums, and it's an interesting theory. It's an interesting possibility, but it was always taught as fact, as this is the way it is. We came up with this great idea, and that's what it is. And that was just a big red flag to me, because it just kept happening repeatedly in the church.
Well, when you're in the fundamentalist type religion, you are constantly fed ridiculous information as fact. So you believe ridiculousness, so you spew ridiculousness. And the only way to stop that is to begin to critical think. So let me show you this Bible verse, right? So the book of Genesis, 1st and 2nd Samuel, and the book of Kings, the books of Kings, they're retold in the book of Chronicles. As a Christian, from the age of 14 to 30 something, I actually became an atheist around 40. I never knew that the book of Chronicles retells those stories. Did you know that? It retells the story of David and Samuel and Genesis, a few of the Genesis stories, retells many of those stories. Guess what? Chronicles doesn't agree with Samuel, Genesis, and the books of Kings. Chronicles doesn't agree with it. Here's an example. Ready, Christians, for your cognitive dissonance? You're going to hate this one. Are you going to evaluate it? You're going to change it? You're going to deny it? Or are you going to evaluate it, change it, or deny it? Or yeah, that's right. So here it is. Second book of Samuel, chapter 8, verse 4. David took 700 horsemen from the king of Zobah. Right? The verse goes, and David took from him 1,000 chariots, 700 horsemen, 20,000 footmen, and David hamstrung the chariot horses, but reserved enough for them for 100 chariots. So he took 700 horsemen. The book of Chronicles tells the same exact story. First Chronicles, chapter 18, verses 3 to 4. David took from him 7,000 horsemen and 20,000 footmen. David also hamstrung all the chariots and reserved enough for them for 100 chariots. So why does Samuel say 700 and Chronicles say 7,000? Oh, wait. Our historians know, because these stories were handed down orally and they were changed over time. It's so simple. So if you don't believe me, go look up those verses. Let your God defend himself. Look at this. How old was King Ahaziah? Ahaziah? 2 Kings 8:26 says Ahaziah was 22. Same exact story. 2 Chronicles chapter 22, verse 2. He was 42. Where was he? 22 or 42? Two little contradictions. There's too many of them to list.
So you've seen both sides. You still have Christian friends, I assume?
I do, yeah.
So how do you identify with them as an atheist, having been a Christian believer?
This is such a great question. I have no problem with having Christian friends, but Christian friends have problems with being my friend. Mm-hmm. Why? Because your religion teaches you that it is your group of people and the world. Your group of people are all right and the world is all wrong. It's you and them, you and them. But because I don't believe in a nonsense religion like that, it's us. We're all one. We're all inhabitants of the same freaking beautiful planet. Let's enjoy ourselves. You want to have a religious belief? Awesome. I want to learn about it. It's such a beautiful thing. Now I want to go to the Hindus and learn about their belief. I want to go to the Buddhists and learn about their beliefs because it's beautiful. These are cultural things that are just beautiful to accept. Why do you make it us and you, us versus you? It's not us versus you. It's you versus everyone else because your religion is teaching you that you're better. So I identify with Christians with no problem. But I've lost several friends that are Christians because I'm an atheist. So it's their problem, not mine. You know, the same church that we're talking about, you know, I rocked that freaking children's church. I think it was cool. Do you remember the day I brought my motorcycle in?
Oh, yeah, and kids ran out scared.
Yeah, because it was so loud. And all the shows we used to put on, they were freaking awesome shows, man. I did so much work. And when I told the pastor I was leaving, not only did he not tell the church my last Sunday, but he didn't say it over the speaker. He didn't say, thanks to our Christian brother who worked so hard for us and did so many good things. He's leaving. We're sad to see him go. Not even a goodbye. I walked out of that church with not one person say goodbye, man. I was messed up. Because once you no longer serve a purpose, you're done.
I was there 10 years. I was the youth pastor. I was on the worship team. I ran the drama ministry. I poured, yeah, they even told me I was, their second son, they'd have me over for holidays and stuff. And, The same thing. When it wasn't announced that I was leaving, there was no blessing that I was leaving. There was just a blessing releasing me from the youth ministry.
Releasing you.
And
Show me, how do you release somebody? So if they have a method for if they have some belief about releasing you into, then every Christian should have that same belief, right? Because they all serve the same God. No, Catholics don't do that. Other Christian religions don't do that. That's a silly fundamentalist term. Release you. Did you have a chain around your ankle? Just nonsense, man.
what also was interesting, though, was that when people knew I was leaving, they told me to beware of his wife and his second daughter,
Yeah.
and that they were gonna just treat me like crap for it. The Sunday I left, that daughter came up and told me she was leaving too, and she supported me, and I still hang out with her. And and that Sunday, his wife came up to me and released me privately. She prayed for me privately.
Released
I
you.
was like, wow. So everyone who told me that they were going to be a dick, they were the only ones in that family that weren't a dick.
You know what, dude? There's story after story about that. So Christians are hearing this right now. They're going, you know what? Because man is imperfect and those churches aren't good. My church is not like that. My pastor's different. Every Christian says that to me. My pastor's different. Mine is so-and-so. Mine is so-and-so. Listen, Christian, you've been sold a bill of goods that you didn't buy. You just have to look into it. Pull out of the matrix for a minute. I'm not telling you don't believe. I'm not saying don't believe. I'm saying let God defend himself. Pull out of the matrix and say, okay, God, here are the problems. What are you going to do about it? And see what happens. Now, a friend of mine was married 30 years, and for the last 10 years of his marriage, he was being cheated on, right? They were both Christians, both in ministry. And he said to me one day, well, God, he already knew I was an atheist, but I understand the fundamentalist thinking. And he said to me, God said it's okay for me to get divorced. And I said, why? He says, I was driving down the street the other day, and there were two doves flying right next to my car. One dove flew away, and one dove stayed. And I just knew God was telling me it was okay for me to just, that she can fly away and I can keep on going with it. I said, that makes complete sense. Or it was just two doves flying next to your car. So when you have a belief, you will make things around you happen. Okay? And there are many, many studies to support this, right? And Darren, what's his name again?
Darren Brown.
Yeah, Darren Brown, that's right.
God, I
Darren
love
Brown.
him. He's my
He's so
Messiah
amazing.
now.
He's done so many studies on things like this. One of them he did was a study on people who say they're lucky and they're unlucky, right? So the lucky person, they discovered they would plant things around the person in their daily life and have hidden cameras. They put a $10 bill, and the lucky person notices, oh my God, look how lucky I am, I have $10, right? And they keep on, then they did the same thing with the person who considered himself unlucky. What they discovered was that the lucky person was just more observant of his surroundings. The unlucky person was so oblivious to what was going on around him. He was so oblivious to it. His name was Wayne. If you look up Darren Brown and you look up this study on luck, he was so oblivious to it. They got a semi and they painted, if your name is Wayne, call this phone number. And drove by him and he didn't even notice it. So people believe they're lucky because there's a reason why they believe that. People believe they're unlucky. There's a reason why you believe that. People believe that God spoke to you. There's a reason why you believe that. Why isn't it Allah that spoke to you or one of the Hindu gods? Why is it your particular God? Well, because that's the one you believe in. So when these things occur around you, you just fill in the blanks and you start saying it was God. There was this other study he did. Did you see the one about the stone statue of the dog in the park?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. He took a stone statue of a dog, called it Lucky, put it in a park in England, and left it there for like 3 months. Then he was in cahoots with the local newspaper and to do this study. The local newspaper wrote that dog has been there for like 50 years, right? Then they began to interview and how that dog's part of the history of the town and all this. Then you rub its head and you get good luck. Then they started interviewing people about the dog. And there was one interview that this older man, and you probably remember this, he said, oh, I remember Lucky the dog. My grandmother talked to me about that dog when I was a little kid. Listen, this is why eyewitness testimony is not used in court. People will make up memories. They will invent things to fill in the blanks. And there's also a psychological name for that too, but it escapes me right now. So the reason why my friend saw those two doves is because he wanted to see those two doves, and he wanted it to be God. So he made it God in his own head, because human beings deceive themselves. They're expert at deceiving themselves. So that's what we did when we were Christians, but then when you start pulling out of that and you start critically thinking, you let the evidence defend itself, and you start finding that it's circumstance, and it was just you filling in the blanks. Cool stuff. But I realized that what happens with the religion natural phenomena is that we are victims of it. So now, so many people if people are hearing this, are getting offended by it, right? Please don't get offended by it, because Neo did not know he was in the Matrix until he was out of it. So I submit this thought process to you. You don't know you're in the Matrix until you're out of it. But to get out of it, you have to bypass how your religion threatens you with hell and rewards you by being subservient, right? But once you get past those two concepts, you get out of it, you look back and you go, holy smokes. And what we were doing, Cody, was a natural human function that religion takes advantage of and exploits. Right. So, yeah, I did the same stupidity, man. But here's how the homosexual thing for Christians makes no sense. The Old Testament says homosexuals should be killed, right? It also says unruly children should be killed, and you should be stoned to death if you shave your beard. Why is it that one is picked out and the others are not?
Right.
Well, because the New Testament also says it. Let's examine the New Testament. The book of Corinthians talks about homosexuality, right? But it also says that a woman shouldn't speak in public and should always have her head covered and should never be an authority over a man. Why is one followed and the other is not? Your religion makes no sense. You follow the homosexual thing, teachings about your religion, because you're told to in the pulpit. But you cannot defend it with your own Bible. You can't. And if anybody hearing this can defend it with their Bible, please tell me about it, because I want to know. So we were doing this nonsense because we were being fed this information over time, right? So here's a perfect example for the Christians hearing this, what a mind prison you're in, okay? So if you understand how North Korea works exactly like religions work. Their information is isolated. You're only given specific information. Now, please, let me have this one note in here really quick. I don't believe most pastors are maliciously doing this. Some are, but most do it just out of kindness, out of love for people around them, right? But they're using these tactics unknowingly. First of all, you isolate the group of people from outside information. China does this, North Korea does this. Then you feed those people wrong information over and over and over and over again until they accept it to be true. Okay? In North Korea, they believe that their dear leader can read their minds. So they don't even think about him in a negative way, because he'll hear them. Now, what would cause an intelligent adult to believe that? Programming over time. In the Christian world, programming is called indoctrination. When you're fed wrong information over and over and over again, you will believe it. I have a friend who has a 12-year-old girl who's 5'9". She's a big old girl. She still believes in Santa when her friends don't. Why? Because he constantly drills into her that Santa is real because he wants to keep her innocence. This is a true story. I just heard about this a couple days ago. He constantly drills into her that Santa's real because he wants to keep her innocence. He tells her, this is what he tells her verbatim: when you stop believing, he stops existing. Okay? Then they have the elf on the shelf, which he moves every night into a new position to make her think that the thing is alive. And this poor child believes.
That's creepy.
It is freaking creepy. So why? Is she stupid? No. Someone she's trusting is feeding her this information. Yep. So Christian, somebody you trust, your pastor, your televangelist, your Bible, is feeding you wrong information. And if you think I'm wrong, go verify it for yourself. So these people in North Korea are in this bubble because they're fed specific information. Why do they believe this person is so supernatural? Well, a woman recently, I think a year ago, escaped North Korea. Many people have done that, but it's very difficult to escape North Korea, just like it's difficult to escape fundamentalism. She escaped it, and she explained this to CNN. She said, I was brought up believing that he could read our minds, so I wouldn't even think negatively about him. And she had a translator. And she spoke about how they all believe that he's a god. that he flies. When he was born, the birds of the area surrounded the house in the wilderness where he was born and all sung in unison, right? They believe these things. Don't they sound just as silly as a snake speaking in the Garden of Eden? Mm-hmm. You know? So the reason why we were in this bubble of belief is because that's all we've been fed. Now, rewind, Cody. Let's take your tiny fetus out of your mom and put it inside of the fetus of an Indian woman, and you're born there, you will believe their beliefs are true. Because you're fed that information from the time you're a little child. So to deprogram that is a difficult thing. And that's why it takes so long for you, and it took so long for me to deprogram that. So that's why I say fundamentalists, you guys are victims. You're victims of your religion because you're being fed wrong information. Again, I repeat this one more time. If you don't believe me, you think I'm lying to you, I'm being guided by the devil, I'm being deceptive, I'm trying to deconvert you, great! Go verify my information. Go ahead. If you verify it from legitimate, neutral sources, you will find that the Bible is wrong. www.bibviz.com is the best summary I can find out there. So, the only way to get out of this is to think for yourself and stop believing what people tell you. Start verifying information. That's it. So listen to this. When atheists, or censuses were being taken on religion, atheists numbered in the late 1800s, early 1900s about 2%, right? And it went up to 5% up to around the year 1999, 1998, the late 90s and early 2000s. Now it's 16%. Why was there a sudden jump in atheism? Do you know why?
No.
Because of the advent of the internet. Mm-hmm. That's what the same time the internet became huge is when atheism jumped. And why? Because the devil is using it to steal God's people, and the devil, and it's scary. No, it's because people are getting information and they're realizing their beliefs are stupid. I'm sorry. Now, I'm not saying the Christian is stupid. I'm saying things like the world is 6,000 years old. It's idiotic. It is a fact that it's 4.5 billion years old. There's science behind this. It's provable. It's testable. So those beliefs are now going away. And the more people get more information, the more Christianity goes away. The same thing with Zeus and the Roman gods and the Greek gods. Thor wasn't shooting lightning down. We discovered why lightning happens. So now Thor doesn't exist anymore. Eventually, God will not exist anymore for most human beings.
I think it's interesting when you mentioned earlier about things people don't know is in the Bible that you like to pinpoint, whether unicorns or whatever it is. I like to mention the lost books of the Bible. When people claim the Bible is infallible, I want to say your perfect book was censored. Certain books were removed because it didn't fit what, I think it was the Romans. I'm going based on memory here.
Right, yeah. So and that's the reason why the word Nazareth, the place Nazareth, is in the New Testament, even though it didn't exist at the time of Jesus.
And so most Christians don't even know they exist.
No, they don't. There were about 20 gospels. One of them was the Gospel of Judas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. There's a lot of gospels. So the history goes like this. So now, this is let me predict what Christians are going to do right now. They're like, he's just guessing. He doesn't really know. He's just guessing. Okay, because that's what your religion does, is it makes you guess, right? I'm not guessing. This is historical fact. Okay, Constantine sent out people to get all the writings of Judaism and Christianity and put them all together in one book, right? That is not the Bible Christians have today. That had so many books. It was a gigantic book, right? Then around the medieval times, around the time of King James, is when King James got this Bible and he edited it in order to make the Bible agree with itself. But he failed because there were too many books. It was just human error. He couldn't make it actually agree with itself. He eliminated the book of, I'm not going to say he, but I guess the people who were translating and doing this, eliminated the book of Revelation. Revelations wasn't added for another 100 years. And then took only the 4 Gospels, right? Why is there somebody in the Middle East called Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, right? Took those 4 Gospels, named them those people, edited the Gospels so that they would agree with each other, and then added it to the Bible, right? But the problem is they screwed up. They didn't have computers. So even the Gospels don't agree. So there are so many different Gospels that were originally in the original Bible that you Christians never hear about. And my explanation as a fundamentalist was because God didn't want him in there, so he divinely did something. It's always magic. It's always something you can never prove. The answer is always something you can never prove, but I can prove to you clearly that the New Testaments are forgeries. It's tragic, and I call fundamentalists victims. They're victims. That's why I don't get angry anymore with fundamentalists, because some people will say to you, I feel sorry for those people because they want to be condescending, but I honestly do feel sorry for them. It breaks my heart that my family is stuck in this thought process. It's just so damaging. And then you see my family that's not Christian and their children are prospering, and they're Catholics, which of course to a fundamentalist, they're all Catholics are going to hell. You can deny it as much as you want, but all you fundies say that. So the ones that are less religious in my family are college degrees and have great marriages, and they're waiting till they're older to get kids. And the ones that are fundamentalists are getting pregnant before they get married, having children super young, like I did. I was a fundamentalist. I got married at 18 because I didn't want to sin. Of course that ended in a divorce. Of course it did. So it just skews your thinking, and it puts you in this fantasy world that does not exist. And even when you put it to the test and you follow what your religion says, it's still a failure, and then you sensory gate it. I'm sensory gating. I don't see any failure. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, that failure happened because of so-and-so. Let me justify it. That was because of the devil. But, it's just this mindless thinking. Stop believing the nonsense you're told and evaluate it for yourself. Look at the facts for yourself.
I can't tell you how many opportunities I missed out on growing up because I thought God was telling me to stay in the church.
Yep. It denies you your youth. Look, sex is a beautiful thing. What's wrong if you're having consensual sex with a great girl? And then you have sex for a while, you're dating for a little while, and you realize, she's not the right girl for me, but you're still my friend, we're still friends, and, I didn't use you, you didn't use me. There's a problem with having sex with a girl who's drunk. I don't believe in that. That's a lack of integrity, man. It's wrong. Or telling a woman you love her just to have sex with her, absolutely wrong. But when you both love each other and you're having sex before you get married, why is that wrong? Because your God says so? He also says that women shouldn't speak in public. Which one do you listen to? It just makes you a mindless person, man.
So are there any more topics or discussions that we haven't discussed that you want to bring up and cover?
Well, there's a couple things I did want to cover. One of them is I want to make it clear that the vast majority of Christians are not fundamentalists. The vast majority of Christians accept evolution because it is a fact. It is a fact. The vast majority of Christians know the world is not 6,000 years old because they're not 5 years old. So when I talk about these Christians, and I'm sure I offended a bunch of people, and if you're that thin-skinned, then why are you listening, right? I'm not thin-skinned about when you tell me I'm the devil and I'm going to hell. It makes me go, I don't fall for that, right? So I want you to know that I'm not against Christianity. That's not what I'm about, all right? Me personally. Now, Christians will always believe that an atheist speaks for all atheists because that's how religion functions. Or you're a follower of Darwin. I'm a follower of nobody. Darwin was wrong on a lot of things, but he started the revolution on understanding where we came from. It was wonderful what he did, but he was wrong about a lot of things too. I don't follow anybody, right? So when I'm telling you this about what I believe, it's strictly what I believe. I'm not speaking for all atheists. They didn't tell me this on our last meeting. It doesn't work that way, right? It's like one black guy speaks for all black people, one Mexican speaks for all Mexicans, one white guy speaks for one atheist doesn't speak for everyone. But so these things that I'm telling you, they're specific to me, and others could have the same belief. I don't care. Doesn't matter to me. I just know what I research. So I don't hate all Christians. I don't hate any Christian at all. I believe most fundamentalists are victims. So most Christians are really, really good people. They're nice people, right? But it doesn't change the fact that being a person who believes in myths and believes in invisible people in the sky is not a good thing for the human race. It's just not a good thing for the human race. It makes it them and us, them and us. It's not a good thing. But even saying that, I don't dislike these people. You can believe in whatever you want to believe. It makes no difference to me as long as you don't affect anybody else. Voting against gay rights affects people. Trying to force creationism in school affects people. Trying to force this to be a Christian country, that affects a lot of people, right? So I don't dislike that. What I dislike is the people who, not the people, but the belief system that causes the people to do these things. This is a terrible thing. And if more people understood what critical thinking is about, religion would be wiped off the face of the earth. But there's this resistance because you're raised believing in this one deity. This right here, this thing is the reason why I'm alive. This thing my mom told me my entire life, and my grandmother and my grandfather all told me this is the reason why. And if somebody told me that, then I'm going to believe this thing is the end-all be-all, right? But if you think for yourself and look at the evidence, say, it's just a piece of metal, it doesn't do anything, then you're going to be freed from this mind prison. Just in closing and all this, I just don't want people to think I'm a person who hates. I just dislike this belief because it is dangerous to humankind. And you know what? Go out there and love your neighbor like Jesus said to love your neighbor. Stop hating homosexuals. Stop hating people that are different from you. Peace. Peace is what matters.
Well, on that note, I really want to thank you for taking the time to come on here and share your thoughts and story and everything. Really
Thanks,
appreciate
man.
it, and would love to have you back on here if you're willing for perhaps
Yeah.
open debate
Yeah.
and stuff.
I could talk about this for days, so yeah, I'll come up with a few other points. I mean, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about it.
Yeah.
I'll come up with a few other points, I'll email you with them, and if you want to talk about those, we'll do those. But until then, if any Christians hear this, and you want to refute anything I say, great. I had a debate with a 15-year-old Christian, and I used the Bible verse incorrectly to prove something, and he proved me wrong. And my answer was, thank you. I'll take that off my list, thank you, because I'm open to change. Why aren't you open to change? So if there's something that I said that you refute or you believe is not true or whatever, and you get anybody who asks those questions, I'm happy to talk about it. I'm happy to talk.
And everyone can feel free to comment below and share your thoughts on this episode. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, there will be a link on the page to contact us. But thank you everyone for listening, and thank you, Albert, a lot for taking up your night to do this. I'm sure God will bless you for it.
You mean the great spaghetti monster?
All right. But
Thanks,
I
man.
guess that's it. Thanks. Have a great night.
Peace.
Peace.